You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis show. And in the next 50 minutes, we will be looking at the Ameri deal, the new Ameri deal, novated, amended, whatever it is called. And my guest for this segment, Ben Boakye, Executive Director, Africa Center for Energy Policy, ASEP. Emmanuel Kuyole is Executive Director, Center for Extractives and Development, Africa, CEDA. And Kwame Jantoa, he's Technical Advisor, Civil Society Platform on Oil and Gas. And Gogi, I can't pronounce the last one. Gogik. Okay, thank you very much. That's supposed to be, which entity is that? Ghana Oil and Gas. For inclusive growth.
Yes,
Okay.
The DFID affiliated.
Right. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Thank you very much. And
Thank you,
sorry
Sammy.
for keeping you waiting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Interesting discussions in the
Yes, the banking crisis almost got us also consolidated. So we almost consolidated your segment into the first one. Right. So briefly, once again, this one, let me start by first getting us to hear the Eugene Ahin from the Jubilee House after the announcement was made about Boakye Agyarko, the energy minister, having been sacked. This is what Eugene Ahin had to say.
Actually, we all know the circumstances that have surrounded the Ameri deal. The President believes that considering the nature of the information that has come out concerning the deal, he believes at this point in time it is in the best interest of the country, it is the best interest of the Ghanaian people, and also it is in the best interest of his administration that he relieves the Minister for Energy of his position at this particular moment. And the former minister has accepted the President's decision.
We've heard that Mr. Boakye Agyarko misled the President. Did that happen?
Evans, the final deal as to what led to the President in his decision would have to be for another conversation. Because I don't know where that information is coming from.
Now, on the substantive matter on the Ameri deal, will the original document that the committee in Parliament had rejected, will it be sent back, or government is, as of now, stepping down that document entirely?
Yes, from the little I know, government is stepping that document down entirely.
But has a decision been taken on what to do with the existing Ameri deal?
I wouldn't be able to comment on that. The decision has not been taken on it as we speak. And if that is done, definitely we'll let the Ghanaian people know. And definitely we'll let you know as well. But as it stands now, I'm unable to comment on it because I don't have any information to that effect.
Has there been any names yet in terms of the substantive ministerial position for the energy minister that the President may be considering already?
No, the President has not has not disclosed any name to me. I don't think he has disclosed.
All right, so Eugene Ahin is the Director of Communications at the Presidency, the Jubilee House, and you heard him in an interview with Evans Mensah. Of course, that last bit has been overtaken by events. Now we know who is the substantive minister of the Energy Ministry, and that is John Peter Amewu, who used to be the Lands and Natural Resources Minister. Now, those of you from ASEP, now the thing in town is that you are controlling the Energy Ministry because the minister and his deputy are all from ASEP. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think, well, it just happened to be the case, but they're also known members of, Nanado's government.
All right.
And therefore the President decides who heads where at any point.
Right. You had issued a statement earlier when this matter began to boil.
Yeah.
And your statement, some people found that a bit, difficult, that it was unexpected that ASEP, who has its founder and, other, leading members in government, will issue a statement that indicts the process that the government was going through. Help us understand what your position, has been on this Ameri renegotiated. Is it the botched renegotiated deal?
Yeah, I find that very interesting. I mean, where we sit, we are always not under pressure to criticize or praise a government. We do analysis. We analyze government policy. And where there are faults, we point it. It's interesting when you come to ASAP and you come to a policy meeting. You cannot push a political view there, because you find a young guy who probably came in a year or two, less experienced than you are, rejecting what you are saying as a senior policy person. So you have a team you are working with, analyzing a document that is before you, and you have to come to a consensus what the decision is to take. So it cannot be because somebody related is in government, and therefore you will shelve whatever analysis the junior policy person has and the conclusion that the body is coming up with, and make fake conclusions about it. And I think that is how we are operating, and it has to continue like that. People have to see documents, analyze the documents, and come out with what supports.
So help us understand your position. I have your document right here, but help us understand your position that, what is it, that Boakye Agyarko's expected savings of 400 million, like the VRA staff have said, was faulty, was completely wrong. Is that where you also stand, and why you feel it's okay that he's been, as it were, sacked?
Yeah, I think we are familiar with the Ameri numbers. I mean, we have been there from the beginning. We saw the memo that went to Parliament, and we saw the tariff that had been renegotiated. And we didn't see the savings of 400 million. Rather we saw a cost. Because if you have a tariff reduced from, we are told, the tariff is 14.5, reduced to 11.7, and you are spreading that over a 15-year period. So to arrive at whether there's a savings or a cost, what you do is to look at the 14.5, how many years is left? We have 2.5 years left. So you do a calculation to see the difference between that 14.5 and then 11.7 for the 2.5 years left. And then you look at what you would be paying beyond the 2.5 years for the 14.5 rate, which we know would have come to 10.4. So then you now have to calculate the difference between your new 11.7 and the 10.4 that the tariff would have come to if the original agreement stayed. Then you can see what cost are you incurring beyond the 5-year period, and then you can compare the savings that you are making for the 2.5 years that you are actually renegotiating. And we saw that it was rather a cost and not a savings. So we struggled to find where the 400 million was coming from. But I assume they probably took the 14.5 and levelized it, put it to a 15-year test, and then put the 11.7 to a 15-year test, and then did the difference. But that is not the case, because the 14.5 would have terminated at the 5th year, which is 2.5 years left, and then the tariff changes. So you can't do that kind of computation to arrive at a savings to the public.
So there was no saving, but there was a cost of how much?
So our analysis actually showed that if you take the difference between the 11.5 and the 10.4, we are actually going to be paying about $762 million more.
700?
Yeah, and 62 million. So if you even discount that, that's about $347 million.
The initial claim was that this had been overpriced by $150 million, correct?
Yes.
And you are saying that from the calculations that were taken to Parliament, if it had been approved, we're going to be paying in excess of 700 million extra.
For the cash flow. So time value of money, you discount that, and that comes to about 347 million. Yeah.
The 700 is not inclusive of the original 510 million.
That will be exclusive of the 2.5 years that we have paid.
Paid
so
already.
255.
Okay.
Yes.
But, okay. How
the confusion goes on.
No, but how did we get here? How did we get there in the first place?
Well,
because there was a committee, a Philip Addison committee that was set up.
Right.
I've gone over the committee's report and recommendations again.
Right.
And it was very clear that what we had was a bad deal.
Right.
And we needed to renegotiate.
Right.
And therefore, this is what he was out to do.
Yes.
How did we get to a point where we're now going to be saddled with even more?
Well, I think as Ben rightly said, it's quite strange that we got there. But there are several issues. But let's stay with the cost issues. One is the other thing that I think was not factored is that, I mean, the Ministry of Energy itself, sometime in March this year, came out with new tariffs. And that is quoted by the VRA staff statement, right, actually, that the current tariff with Ameri is not 14. It's not as was original in the first agreement that, I mean, in the current agreement that we have with Ameri, but it's actually 12 point. It's actually 12.119 cents per kilowatt hour. So in the first place, even using the 14.59 was wrong, because that's not what we are paying to Ameri at the moment. So that's an additional issue with the numbers. The other thing is that I think there's a lot of the numbers and the assumptions behind their numbers were also very problematic. The other one is that you see that, as Ben said, how they arrived at the 400 million savings was that they looked at even though the memo was very clear to Parliament, the memo was very, very clear if you look at where, I think it's the first page, page 3 of the memo, the minister's memo. He actually breaks down the tariffs into 2 categories. The first 5 years, year 1 to year 5, we're supposed to be paying 14.59. And then from year 6 to the 20th year, we're supposed to be paying 10.41. But when you come to page 5, you see that he actually, in comparing the existing contract with the proposed amendment, he actually used the starting 4.5, forgetting that at the end of the 5th year, which is year 2020, we are not going to be paying this amount. We're actually going to be paying something far, far less. And so by working through the 15 years with the 14.5 was what created the problem. And trying to compare 14.5 over 15 and 11.5, you get it gives you an impression of a saving. And if you did that cumulatively, you're going to get like a certain figure, which then gives you that. But that was wrong. So the assumptions were wrong. The other one, which is problematic, is also in the minister's memo, actually. And again, this is cited by some of other people. If you look at page, I think page 4, IV, there is a statement there that says that the government of Ghana and VRA, in discussion in this new deal, agrees to waive a certain $52 million. But then the next page, under justification 3.01, the minister again says that Ameri Metallurgics, which is the new company, agrees to pay $52 million. So a figure that had been earlier said that had been waived. How then does a new company then accept that they are going to pay? If they accept that they are going to pay, which means that they are not a Father Christmas, they are going to add this to their cost of investment. And then the government of Ghana and VRA will have to pay. So there were a couple of things really wrong with the assumptions and the arithmetic.
Hold on briefly, but Mr. Agyarko, the Energy Ministry and the Minister must have the benefit of the best of expertise. How could he have gotten it this wrong, if you agree that this is what it is?
It's quite mind-boggling, knowing that apart from even within the Energy Ministry, there are other stakeholders that could have been brought into the fray. That wasn't done. One of the things I'd like to find out, and probably you'll be able to correct me, is that on the 14 cents, when they say it now, the opposition says it would now reduce to 10.49 cents once the 5 years is over. That 14 cents, is it not part and parcel of the cost of the equipment also? Hence, if it now reverts to Ghanaians, that is how we now come to the so-called 10.49. That wasn't made clear. That seemed to have been papered over by the work that was done by the minister. The other thing also is that the committee that was set up, are we saying they got it wrong? Because
the Philip Addison Committee.
The Philip Addison Committee.
The first committee.
Exactly.
But we understand that the minister too had gotten some committee of sorts to do this work.
Yes. So
at two levels.
So at two levels, did what the result of the Philip Addison Committee and the result of this second committee, did their conclusions match? Because if their conclusions didn't match, then definitely there was a problem there. The other thing I asked myself, Samson, was this really a political stance? What do I mean by that? Would it be that because when new governments come in, we try to catapult what the old governments have done? And the reinforcement by the president in his statement when he was talking about the American military thing, where he said, we inherited a nearly bankrupt country. They were trying to point holes in this deal. And because of that, the minister was trying anything he could to punch those holes. Because when you look at the costings that were given us, they said the whole, NDC government said the whole thing was 510. If the whole thing was 510, the units were 10 units. They made the calculation that one unit cost 850,000. When you now extrapolate it to a year, it comes to maybe 102 million. Then 5 years, it comes to 510. If that is the case, where is the fraudulent 150? Because they haven't been able to answer that question as to how they say that 150 seems fraudulent. Because they said, yes, it should have been around 360 million. They haven't been able to tell us why they say that. So they should have done some real work. Apart from that, was there a value for money audit done on the first contract? Was the same done on the second contract? Because I'm sure if this was done, it would have been an easy way to identify whether this deal was fraudulent or not.
Okay, now let me hear from Clara, and I'll return to come to Ben and you guys, because this is your area. Now, Clara, the Philip Addison Committee, pointed out a number of issues. They included legal issues. And on the legal front, among others, they said that the government of Ghana approved a wide exemption of taxes for Ameri and its third parties. Basically, Ameri and all its affiliates and subcontractors and third parties are not liable to pay any form of tax whatsoever in the Republic of Ghana. The committee does not find this acceptable. Going forward, contractors must be made to pay taxes such as corporate and income tax. Then they spoke about the fact that they made a recommendation also that henceforth no PPA should be entered into by a public entity unless it is as a result of a full competitive bidding process. But this is where is another curious point, that going forward, it said there is no legal opinion on the Ameri from the AG's department. However, the committee was reliably informed that the Deputy Attorney General was present during negotiations and execution of the agreement. Going forward, it is important that a legal opinion from the Attorney General's department is sought to ensure that agreements conform to the laws of the country. Now, this one that was also taken to Parliament. One of the problems we discovered was that there was no Attorney General's opinion, and that the Finance Ministry also was required to issue, a paper on it, and that was also lacking. My curiosity is, what makes it curious for me is how a committee will point out certain errors and then we'll end up repeating the same, going to Parliament. How do you appreciate that?
It's difficult and quite confusing. Like he said, then you start to wonder, what was it? Were we looking for the problem so that we can address the problems? Or we were just looking for the problem so that we can make political capital out of them? It comes back to that. And if you look at it, this is a very important deal. It's rather frustrating that we are where we are. The issues they raise, for example, tax exemptions, putting politics aside, is a critical issue. I have an issue generally with our penchant to grant exemptions to entities that enter into agreement with our government. I've always said that I can understand the colonial basis for that penchant, because under the colonial regime, it was consistent with their philosophy of exploitation, that we come in and we take what we want and then we take it out. They didn't really feel that much obliged to give back, except to the extent that it was needed to maintain the structures of the colonial administration to enable them to exploit. But after we have come into independence, leaving our colonial mentality aside, I have a difficulty understanding why someone does business in Ghana and that business is being paid for with the taxpayers' money. That person is earning an income from Ghana, and then we think we should exempt the person from paying taxes. Philosophically, I have a difficulty understanding that. But it's more or less been the practice that a lot of the time, particularly the ones whose taxes would be a lot, we give them exemptions. You take this tax exemption, you take that tax exemption. Then we start chasing Kofi and Ama, who are earning small income, to make up for the taxes. So philosophically, I have a problem with our penchant of giving tax exemptions. So that was a legitimate issue that they raised. Of course, once the exemption had been granted, if Parliament if it's gone through parliamentary approval, they have it and you can't take it back, more or less. But going forward, it was good advice to be taken. Legal opinion, definitely. Because if the government, generally for every business entity that is entering into a very serious and capital-intensive transaction, they would get a legal opinion. They will get a legal opinion on the transaction. And we know that the Attorney General is the legal advisor to the government. So yes, you should expect that the Attorney General would give a legal opinion, and of course, reasonably but again, like you said, but this was missing. So then it comes back to, so it's quite confusing. If we were supposed to identify problems and remedy them, how do we end up with the same, we just point them out and repeat the issues that we had problems with. The good thing is that, at least as embarrassing as this is, I am quite impressed that government has been bold enough to abandon it. Okay. I know that sometimes it is difficult, that even in the middle of something, when you realize you are wrong, because you want to save face, you may have a difficulty backtracking, because you know when you backtrack, it is clear that a clear admission on your part. What
do you say to those who are saying that the minister didn't do this alone and shouldn't take, as it were, individual liability or responsibility, and that, even the presidency gave an executive approval, and that there were several other people who were involved, so all of them should?
There are legitimate concerns that they most likely, because we don't have the facts, that most likely the minister didn't do this alone. Like you're saying, there was a Philip Addison committee, right, and there was another committee. What was their role in all of this that led us to where we are? So yes, I think that, consistent with my advocacy for accountability, I think it would be great if the president would at least look a little bit more, not a little bit, a lot more into the transaction, and then try to do something to just to inspire, not just to inspire accountability, so that going forward, I mean, this doesn't happen. This is our country. This is the taxpayers.
All right. So Ben, you are familiar with the Addison Committee report. We may start from that point, if you don't mind. Whether or not you feel that there was any recommendation in there regarding the financial arrangements and the technical aspects of the agreement, that the Philip Addison Committee got it wrong. Did they get anything wrong in that respect?
Yeah, I think I've read the report, and the conclusion they essentially came to was that given They claim that the contract was overpriced. They should go and negotiate with Ameri or cancel.
Yeah, if they are unwilling to negotiate, they should abrogate the contract on the basis of fraud.
But I mean, if you read the contract, you realize that it was not in their place to say that, because this is a contract that has been executed, delivered. You agree with a company that bring turbines to Ghana to generate power, and they have delivered that. You were supposed to pay your part of the bargain. You know, you cannot just say that because you feel that the contract is overpriced, they should come to the table to negotiate. Failure to do that, you cancel the agreement. And those were the problems we had with it. We gave everything to Ameri, and once it was delivered, you can only appeal to them to come down on the price, or you pay what you have agreed to pay. Because if somebody comes and says, I'm selling a plant to you at 510 million, if there is any other information contrary and you don't pay attention to it, and you agree to pay that much, and they deliver the plant, you have to pay for it. Unless you have a genuine grounds to say that you see corruption, you can track corruption, you can track deception, you can track what probably could have inflated the price, which we saw arrest, we saw search warrants moving around, and nothing came out of it. So if you didn't have any contrary evidence to show that the contract was that much because of some fraudulent means, you couldn't just cancel the agreement. And that's why we are here today, trying to push the deal to another company instead of engaging Ameri.
So you agree that the miscellaneous deal is, sort of a double, there's an overpriced contract, we say, and then we are also seeking to overprice it the second time. You agree that that is what it is?
How did we get miscellaneous in here? I mean, there is a company called...
Was it overpriced in the first place by 150?
Yes, because we got to know that because Metka, which is the EPC contractor, the one that is delivering the project, they are going to bring in a plant, deliver the project, maintain it for the 5 years. They issued a statement to say that the value they are getting for that was 350 million. And that's how government got to know, the public got to know that the plant is actually costing, the delivery is costing 350 million. So where is the 100?
So by this new agreement,
coming from?
We were getting an overpriced, is this service or a product twice?
Exactly, but what is even interesting is that the company that says that they are delivering the project for 350 million, they are the ones we are now giving this new deal to at far expensive value.
Right.
So that is why it even gets more intriguing. If somebody says he would deliver the project at 350 and you want to engage the same company, you rather want to at least maintain the 350 and not to balloon it, to a far higher value.
I have a more technical question I will put to you here. You deal with it quickly. That according to the Ghana Energy Supply Plan, the capacity utilization of the Ameri plant is to drop to 20% after 2019 because more efficient combined cycle plants, some of which are currently under construction. You talk about the 340 megawatt Send Power, 190 megawatt Amandi will be commissioned in a few months. So the question is, why do you want to extend the term to 15 years, knowing beforehand that the plant will almost not run from 2020?
Yeah, I think that is our fear, even at the center where we sit watching the power sector. We are faced with a situation where if we're not careful, the power sector will derail any progress the country makes. Because we have signed too many power purchase agreements, and these plans are coming into fruition. They are being developed. And once they come in, the agreement is take or pay. So whether they generate power, whether we need the power that is being generated or not, we are going to have to pay for them.
So we would have been paying miscellaneous 75 million
every year.
Every year.
Yeah, so I'm
for
coming to
for what we don't need.
Absolutely.
Or
So
for not giving us generating electricity for us.
Yes, if we don't need them, we would have to still be paying them 75 million every year for it. And the reality is that even today, we are faced with about $200 million excess capacity that we have to pay for, and that could grow to about 600 million by 2020. So what you have to do is probably take a certain critical decision to say, which ones can we cancel and even bear the consequences? Because once they come into fruition, you're going to have to pay far more than that. So we have to look at this consideration and say that if these plans will not be needed over this certain period of time, the conservative decision to take will be to see how you deal with it now and not incur future costs. And these plans that you mentioned, the Amandi, the Sempower, they are almost here.
All right.
And once they come, we have to pay for it. And now we even have excess today. And when those ones come, who is going to pay for it? So we're going to use the money that will be needed for free SHS and all the big promises to now be paying people because we have signed contracts, you know, that are not needed.
Yes, Kwame, you wanted to make an intervention there.
May I play devil's advocate here? The actual contract was with Ameri, wasn't it?
So?
It wasn't with the EPC company.
Okay.
And so, if Ameri wants to make profit on the business, should we fault them? Yes, it could be excessive profit, but should we fault them? They feel, yes, we can get it for this, but it's our contract and we want to make profit on it. Hence, I see the profit they've made. But yes, it's excessive. I'm sure if the profit came to $5, nobody will say anything, but it was excessive. Now, I'm not sure whether we're going to come to that, but in terms of liabilities with the contract, it's two sides. With the Boakye Agyarko contract, it's two sides. Why do I say it's two sides? It's the side of the minister where he didn't do good value on what he was doing. And it's on the side of the presidency too. Because when the contract came to the presidency, were these questions asked?
You mean when the presidency was giving the executive approval?
Exactly. No, before they give the executive approval.
Okay.
Shouldn't they have asked the questions? Where's PURC? Where's Attorney General? Where's Minister of Finance? We need to see all these things before we sign. Now, when you look at the letter that was signed, if it is the right letter that is circulating, it's not the president's signature that is on there.
It's his secretary.
It is the executive secretary's signature that is on there.
It's his secretary. He does for the president.
Okay, he does for the president.
That's taken for granted.
It shouldn't be taken for granted. Because some of the things that are going round, people are asking, why isn't that the president signed it, but it's the secretary who signed it?
What are you suggesting? What are you insinuating?
The
president was unaware.
What I'm trying to say.
That a group of people were playing the president.
It could be. We don't know. Because you see, I would have loved it if the presidency...
How is that possible?
Why isn't it possible?
With such a contract?
Why isn't it possible? Why? Give me a reason why it's not possible.
That it will never be found out that someone else played the president.
Do we know
a contract of such quantum?
Do we know why? Have we been told today by the presidency why Boakye Agyarko was sacked? Should not that have been the first point of call? Especially when the president was appointing his ministers, he brought them closely and told us, I'm putting this person here because of X, Y, Z.
He didn't say any of them was infallible.
Well, but then tell us. The president is responsible to the people of Ghana, not responsible to his political party only. He's responsible to the people of Ghana. And the people of Ghana are asking.
By law, he's not under obligation to explain why he's sacking anybody.
So we should continue doing the status quo kind of politics we do. There has to be a change.
What explanation do you you want to hear?
I would have loved the president to come and tell us that, as you rightly said, this deal is one that can affect anything we're doing. It can affect a lot of things that I want to put in place. And I find that there has been an abrogation of duty here because of A, B, C, D, E I found in this project that was brought to me. This contract agreement was brought to me. And because of that, I have decided to sack the Minister of Energy. It will stop all these insinuations going around. And then if we're going to discuss it, we will discuss the reasons why the president has given to sack the Minister of Energy.
If he has to explain, he will have to explain how the executive approval was
Go through the value chain. Go through the value chain for even us, those who aren't legal-minded people, to understand what it means to have, executive approval. How many people know the process of executive approval in this country? Not a lot of people. And it helps us.
Okay. What do you say first with the contradictions that we find? Paul Admochiri, disclosed to us for the first time here, and perhaps to the entire
Where does
nation.
Paul come in?
Where does to the entire nation, he brought a letter that showed that Ameri had disclaimed that it had actually gone into any meeting to renegotiate the contract.
Right.
And that letter was circulating. And then later we got another letter that suggested that Ameri had actually appointed an attorney to negotiate with the ministry. But that letter appointing the attorney appears to have been signed a day before the document was sent to Parliament, and that was also curious.
Many things are curious and have been.
Because the suggestion would have been, the inference would be that it was that day that the person was appointed, the attorney was appointed, and then the negotiations were had. Or it is that the negotiation has already been had with the agent, but that they were now seeking to regularize it by issuing a letter to say this guy had been appointed to negotiate. So people found that appeared to be blatant lie.
Yeah, I think that on the process side of things, there are a number of questions. That's where I think agreeing with Clara that it's good that the president has put this on hold. But it's important also to give credit to civil society, to institutions and the media and everybody who participated in making sure that this is put on hold. So we are talking about an agreement that has not been executed yet. So in a sense, for me, in terms of the accountability thing, that's a very good, and that's the direction we should be going. So having said so, that's also why I think I kind of side with Kwame on perhaps probing further how this could have all come to place. Because when you look at the chronology of events from the current contract in 2015 up till now, what has happened, for us to get here, I think that there's a lot more questions, and I agree. So, for example, when you're talking about the committee, the Lawyer Philip Addison Committee, one of the worrying things for me is that when you look at the list of people who participated in that committee, some of them, we know, were involved in 2015, the negotiation process, and they were part of the committee. So, in coming to the conclusions that they came to, and some of them you were reading, the legal conclusion, I asked myself, if some of these people sat in the negotiation of the original contract, how could they be coming to these conclusions in the first place? So that's one. Two, some of the conclusions and recommendations from that committee have anything to do with this new innovation agreement. You can see that there are some contradictions in some of the recommendations and what actually the way the current agreement was drafted. And then, so the point I'm trying to make is that when you look at the way the process went and how the executive approval was sought and how the contract got to Parliament and the speed at which, they wanted this approved, regardless of the fact that this is not 2015, and we shouldn't forget that the context has changed so much. In 2015, we were in the thick of an energy crisis, which and other institutions have estimated that it was costing us over $600 million a year. In fact, the president, when he was launching his strategy in 2017, actually said that, I think it was 14th April thereabout that he made that statement, that over the last 4 years, which was, I think, 2012 up to the 2016, the doomsday process had cost us about $3 billion as a country. And so, given that energy was so critical to the president's commitments and his strategy, he was going to make sure that, he focused on energy. So having said this background, I thought that anybody who was going to touch Ameri will do a lot of due diligence. So I agree. I think a lot more questions need to be asked about the process. If we can get a deal like this through and get an executive approval, how many executive approvals have we gotten? And how many of them could have been wrong? I think the lesson for me is that it's probably about time that we minimize the executive approval process. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't understand the legal implications, but I think that it's important that we have an executive approval, but it should be limited, because that's what this is pointing to, and perhaps to fish out who else was involved.
We'll take my very final break, and when I return, we'll hear from Clara as well. But one other question that you would need to deal with, you and Ben perhaps may want to pay attention to, is the questions that have been asked about the fact that the VRA already was unable to pay the 102 million remaining for the 2.5 years. And if that were the case, how was it now able to pay 75 million plus annually for 15 years? We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis show. We've got just about 2 minutes to get out of the studio. Okay, so can we look at it this way, Clara, in some 30 seconds, if you can? Was it not possible for Parliament to correct these errors if really we all agree, as the experts say, that this was overpriced and needed to be worked at? What was the problem? Couldn't they have corrected the errors and do a proper thing and we move on?
Oh, but it wasn't just about errors. There were issues with the substance of the agreement. So this is not one of the things that Parliament should have. And even I also don't. It would not be advisable for Parliament to see these glaring things and assume they are errors. Absence of a legal opinion from the Attorney General cannot be considered as an error. It is not there. Is Parliament now going to turn into the legal advisor and then provide an opinion so as to go or not? So it was good at least that Parliament did not overlook the important issues that were supposed to be raised. And I think what also helped is that, like he said, civil society, because there was a lot of talk everywhere about this, it helped that people started to pay attention. But this then also comes back to government communicators, because when people come out defending it, back to all of us, if you don't understand something, shouldn't you probably try to...
Thank you. Ben, just 20 seconds. What should be the way forward for this? What do? We abandon it? We keep to what we already have?
No, I think we have to go and negotiate. We have to go and meet Ameri and see what we can get out of it. And essentially, that is what we have to do. But just a bit on the executive decision that was granted. I don't think it is wrong to get executive decision. It's the history behind executive decision that we have problems with. In the past, they all tend to shortchange the country, and that's why we are worried about it. And I mean, if this one had given us a better option, I'm not sure.
Right. I'm sorry, but we have run out of time. Ben Boakye is Executive Director, African Center for Energy Policy, ASEP. Emmanuel Koyule is the Executive Director, Center for Extractives and Development, Africa, CEDA. And Kwame Jantwa is Technical Advisor, Civil Society Platform on Oil and Gas. And Clara has been with us since we started, the birthday lady. Sharing your birthday with Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa, who is also having his birthday today. Thank you all. I'm Samson Ladi Anyani. My outfit, as always, is by Latida. Have a good afternoon.